No clue at all. Okay, so we're starting in Numbers 13. And they have been traveling, they've left Sinai, Mount Sinai, and they've been traveling 2 months. And they have reached the edge of the promised land. 2 months of travel and they could be in the promised land. But now we're going to find out why they didn't make it. So since I know what the second set of verses is, I'm going to have you start with verse 1 through 3 so Janice gets fun ones.
Okay. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel.
Okay, so what's the assignment?
Go explore the land.
Explore the land.
Check it out.
Check it out. Figure out if it's a good land to live in. Learn the military strength. Do you see anything about they're about deciding whether you're going to go in or not?
No.
That's not part of the assignment. They're not. God already said he's given it to them. They're not supposed to be deciding, are they going to take God's gift? And we'll see in Deuteronomy chapter 1 that it's the people's idea to do this trip. It wasn't God's idea. It wasn't Moses' idea. It's one of those times where God says, you want it? Go ahead and do it. God doesn't tell them to do it. But since they insist on doing it, God tells them what they're supposed to do. They're not good listeners here. Moses, in the first place, Moses should have told them, no, we already know. God told us this is a good land. We don't need to spy on it. It's good. And he already told us he's given it to us. We don't have to figure out whether we should take it or not. God said we're going to. Even though it wasn't God's plan, God is still going to use it as a test for the people. Just a clue, they don't pass the test. So they choose these spies from the people. And Janice gets the fun verses that talk about who they are, verses 4 through 16.
These are their names.
Oh. Now you know why. It's not me.
Shamua, son of Zachar, from the tribe of Simeon. Shaphat, son of Hori, from the tribe of Judah. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, from the tribe of Issachar. Egal, son of Joseph, from the tribe of Ephraim. Hoshea, son of Nun, from the tribe of Benjamin. Palti, son of Raphu, from the tribe of Zebulun. Gadiel, son of Saudai, from the tribe of Manasseh, a tribe of Joseph. Gadai, son of Susi, from the tribe of Dan. Amiel, son of Gamali, from the tribe of Asher. Sether, son of Michael, from the tribe of Naphtali. Nabi, son of Voshti, from the tribe of Gad. Gul, son of Maki. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua.
Okay, so they pull a leader from each tribe, but these are not names we've seen before, other than Caleb and Joshua. These are all new guys. They think they're young, that these guys are younger than the other leaders were, because they're going to do a lot of traveling. And you don't want to make 80-year-old guys do a lot of traveling up rough country, so it seems like they choose younger ones. You'll also notice one of the tribes not listed, the tribe that's not listed is Levi. They're not sent on this trip. But when there's a list like that, there's always 12 tribes. So when the Levites are not listed, what they do is split the tribe of Joseph in two, and we get Manasseh and Ephraim. So in this case, Manasseh and Ephraim half tribes are listed as a full tribe. So that is still 12. So Judah is represented by Caleb. It's interesting, the name Caleb in Hebrew is the same as dog. Dog. And in Hebrew, in their culture, dogs are not pets. They're mongrels that wander around and scavenge for food, and they're not usually nice. But in this case, it's more of an idea of faithful, enduring. They will go after what they need to go after. So in Caleb's case, dog is not a bad thing, because it'd be calling someone you dog in their culture. But for him, it's meaning a good thing. And then we see Joshua. We see he had a different name first. His first name meant salvation. But Moses gives him a new name. And in Hebrew, it's actually Yahoshua, which means Yahweh is salvation. In English, his name would be Jesus. So Jesus and Joshua are the same names. Kind of like William and Bill or something like that. They're the same name. So when you talk about Jesus, the name can be Joshua too. Let's look at verses 17 through 20.
And Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said to them, go up this way into the south, and go up to the mountains, and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests, there or not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes.
Okay, you talk about the season of the first ripe grapes. That's usually July. So that's how they know that it was about 2 months after they left Mount Sinai, because they talk about the season of first ripe grapes. So Moses tells them go into the Negev and then into the hill country or the mountains. Most commentaries feel that by telling them to go into the mountains or hill country, he's saying go to Lebanon. So basically, he's saying go through that whole country. Go all the way up and all the way back. Now, Moses had already told them the land was good. It was a land of milk and honey back in Exodus 3. Back in Exodus 13:5, he said it was a good land. So by them insisting that they're going to go on this trip, it shows that they don't have faith. They don't trust Moses, who spoke for God. It doesn't matter if they find out the Canaanites are weak or strong, whether there's few or many, whether they're in camps or walled cities. None of that matters. They should already know that the land is good and God gave it to them. They're going to take the land. Nothing else matters. And if you think about it, God had defeated the Egyptians. They were the mightiest army known. And they had chariots, and they had huge numbers, and God just wiped them out. The Canaanites are nothing compared to that. They don't have the faith that God can take care of something smaller than he's already taken care of. And where's their faith? But then don't we do that too? Hasn't God taken care of some big things for us? And then something little comes along. And we don't have the faith he can take care of that. Okay, let's look at verses 21 through 25.
So they went up and scattered out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. They went up through Negev and came to Hebron, where Iman, Zeshah, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were living.
Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. When they came to the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a branch with the second cluster of grapes, which was carried on a pole by 2 men. They also took some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting out the land.
Okay, so they did a bit of traveling all the way out. The wilderness of Zin is at the very bottom, while Rehob is near Mount Lebanon at the very top. So they did what they were instructed and went all the way up and all the way down. It seems like they traveled somewhere between 250 and 500 miles. Depends on how much wandering around they did while they were there. And they did that in 40 days. Now, there weren't any instructions to go for 40 days and be back at the end of 40 days. No instructions there at all. But it was providence. 40 days is very symbolic. What else has been, where else in the Bible do you see 40 days? Noah. Reigned 40 days, 40 nights. I'm sorry? Moses up on Mount Sinai, 40 days, 40 nights. Jesus went into the wilderness, 40 days. There's several other 40 days things. It's 40 designates a time of testing. So they're having a time of testing, not doing so well. Now they don't discover anything that God didn't already tell them. They already knew the names of the pagan nations that were in Canaan. They already knew the land was good. So they just discovered what God had already said. So they see people, they see produce. The grapes are so big that they hang them on a pole. Now, there's some commentaries that say it doesn't necessarily mean they were big, but most of the other most of the other commentaries say, yeah, they were huge. Eshcol, where they got it from, means Valley of Grapes. So it was a good grape produce. It was their Napa Valley, I guess. So a huge cluster of grapes has been a symbol of Israel for a long time. In fact, that thing is kind of fuzzy, is Israel's Department of Tourism symbol. And if you look, it's an abstract thing of 2 men carrying a cluster of grapes. So, and I'll post that in the comments. So,
like, oh, they're there.
Yeah, it's really abstract and it's fuzzy, but it's there.
I think it was part of VBS.
Yeah. Yep, I brought that. So it also says they went to Hebron. If you remember back in Genesis, when we studied about Abraham, the only piece of land he ever actually bought was in Hebron. And it was a burial cave. And it's where he and several of the patriarchs and wives are buried. So they go to Hebron. But they don't seem to notice anything about, there's no mention about, oh, we're in the land where our forefathers were. Nothing like that. They just seem to overlook that. And then it gives an interesting note about how Hebron was built before Zoar in Egypt. They think that's actually just a way of boasting that we're older. Our land is older than the land of Egypt. We have more, ours was established first, just boasting. We see a reference to the descendants of Anak. They were a giant group of people. They were big and fierce warriors. Some say Goliath was a survivor of the descendants of Anak. But there's a problem. Anak was around, the Anakim were around before the flood. So they would have been killed out with the flood. So Anak could have become a term for big giant men, because Anakim wouldn't have survived the flood. Okay, verses 26 through 29.
Wait. The men, is that what I'm saying? The men went back to Moses and the entire Israelite community in the wilderness of Paran and Kadesh. They brought back a report for them and the whole community, and they showed them the fruit of the land. They reported to Moses, "We went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey, and here is some of its fruit. However, the people living in the land are strong, and the cities are large and fortified. We also saw the descendants of Anak there, the Amalekites. The Amalekites are living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites and Jeshuites and Amorites live in the country, and the Canaanites live by the sea and along the Jordan."
Okay, so they come back and report good news and bad news. They were so impressed with the land. They said, yeah, it's the land of milk and honey. But there's some really mean people living there. The word however, or whatever your version uses, it's a really strong word. It's a really big but. And then we get a list of all the ites that are in the land. God already told them who was going to be in the land, and they found what they were supposed to find. They found what God said was going to be there. And several of them have walled cities. Now, looking into the future, with Jericho, are walled cities a problem?
Mm-hmm.
Not for God. These people are so unbelieving and unfaithful. I mean, if what they found didn't match what God said, there'd be a problem. That would make God a liar, but he's not a liar. So they found what God said they'd find. They don't think they can beat these people, and they can't, but God can. So their faith has failed. They didn't believe God would fulfill his promise. They're afraid, but afraid of the wrong thing. They need to have a healthy fear of God, and they're fearing people. Wrong thing to fear. They had walked on the land that their forefathers had walked, on a special land, and they were looking at all the wrong things. So some of the people they encountered the Amalekites, who had been descended from Esau. The Amalekites become a metaphor for wickedness. You have the Hittites that lived near Hebron, which is where Abraham had bought his land. You have the Jebusites from the city of Jebus, which becomes Jerusalem. You got the Amorites and the Canaanites. Whenever you see the term Canaanites, it's like saying, and everybody else, all the other tribes that are there. Now, not mentioned are the Philistines, because at this point, the Philistines aren't powerful. They probably were there, but just getting there, but they're not powerful. So they're not mentioned yet. We know they're going to be a big problem in the future. Verse 30, well, you look out again.
But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it."
Caleb, what a good guy. He is one of the few shining lights here in this story. He's ready to take what God told them and go fight these guys and take over the land. He knew God could overcome every roadblock they had. Notice, though, he's not addressing the 10 other spies. He's addressing all the people. Now, the people are listening to the 10, and Caleb is trying to shut down this negative vibe, because you know how quickly a negative vibe gets going. Now, he's completely politically incorrect. everybody else is against him, but he is standing up. And we need to be that way too. If there is something wrong spiritually, we need to stand up and be like Caleb. We can't even see the strength of his statement in English. It is a super strong statement in Hebrew. He's saying what are called emphatic phrases. He's emphasizing everything. Major Ian Thomas said, it's not let's let go and let God, it's let God and let's go. I kind of like that. We don't see it here, but Joshua is standing with Caleb. He's on the same side. So there's 2 that are standing for the right thing and 10 for the wrong. Verses 31 through 33.
When the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." So they brought to the people of Israel about the port of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are a great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we were seen to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them."
Okay, so Caleb's overruled. The 10 spies get together and they have a combination of a little truth, a lot of lies, and major exaggeration. From a human perspective, yeah, they were stronger people. But it's a lie that they couldn't go up against them. And they have an army of 600,000. There is no way that the Canaanites' armies are that big. They may have been more trained, but they wouldn't have had the numbers.
And they didn't have God.
No, and they didn't have God. They exaggerated the size of the men. Yeah, the Anakim were large, but not everybody in the country was large. Now, the Anakim are part of the Nephilim, and the last time we saw them was Genesis 6, before the flood. So again, they cannot be direct descendants of them, because they would have died in the flood. But just using the word Nephilim or Anakim just evoked fear in people. They knew they were really mean, powerful soldiers. It's kind of like during the Gulf War, Marines had the reputation in Iran of being these super soldiers that didn't care about, they just wanted to kill everybody. So everybody in Iran was just terrified of these Marines. And after things settled down and Marines came through, they were just terrified of them because they heard these stories. So that's the kind of thoughts they have about the Anakim. If you've ever watched the movie Noah with Russell Crowe, which is the second worst Noah movie ever made, the worst Noah movie ever made was with, I forgot his name. But Noah's best friend was Lot. Yeah, and Lot attacked him. He survived the flood and came on a pirate ship and attacked the ark.
I thought Russell Crowe's was the worst. But...
No, that one is so bad it's hilarious. But Russell Crowe's is meant to be taken serious, but it's so wrong. Yeah. So the Nephilim in that movie were fallen angels encased in rocks, giant rocks. That's not what they were. In reality, the word means fallen angels. And it's thought that fallen angels had come and had relations with women, and these were the result. But again, they would have all died in the flood. Mm-hmm. So, back to the spies, all 12 of them saw the same exact thing. But they didn't see them through the same eyes of faith. 10 of them panicked. 2 of them saw God's victory. So when giants show up in your life, how do you see them? It's so easy to panic and worry. I tend to be a worrier until I calm down and remember who has the battle. A little story. There was a shoe salesman that was sent to a remote part of the country. When he arrived, he was dismayed because everybody was barefooted. So he wired the company and he said, there are no prospects for sales here. People don't wear shoes here. Later, another salesman went to the same territory and he immediately sent word back to the office, but his telegram said, great potential. People don't wear shoes here. So it was all in how they look at it. Brian Bill, he's a pastor, he says the question in life is not how big is the problem or how big am I, it's how big is my God. If you notice in here, the 10 spies do not mention God anywhere. Their focus is not God at all. In about 8 weeks, these 10 spies are going to be dead. Only 2 of them are going to live. Yeah. And that's Caleb and Joshua. And we are going to see a lot of them because of their faith. Okay, we're in chapter 14. It's still carrying on part of the same story. Verse 1.
Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night.
Okay, so the 10 spies, well, all the spies, were representing the people of Israel. So this lack of faith of the 10 is representing the lack of faith of all the people. And it says all. And in Hebrew it means all. It's not a minority. It's not even a slight majority. This terror is contagious. And when it says they were crying, remember Hebrews don't have little soft tears coming down. They are wailing. And the word means they are crying over and over. They are not letting up. It must have been pretty sad sound to hear and pretty loud. And it happens all night. No one's getting any sleep. So why are they crying?
You could take it 2 different ways. Mm-hmm. They're crying because they can't go into the land. These people brought back together. And then they were just crying because they didn't know what was going to happen.
And they have a fear.
Yeah, they are really afraid.
Well, they were missing the good times in Egypt, too. I mean...
Oh, yeah, the wonderful times.
I would cry over that probably if I thought about the good times, you know.
Be a slave.
Yeah, but they don't remember that part.
They never remember the bad part.
Yeah. They're blaming, yeah. They're blaming God for the loss of hope. He didn't take their hope away. They're whining because God isn't making everything easy for them. But people do that today.
Yep.
Why is God doing this to me? He's not. We're doing it to us. We need to trust Him. Grumbling's so easy, and it's so dangerous. Have you ever been around someone that grumbles all the time?
Yes.
Are they your favorite person to be around? Yeah. Isn't it nicer to be around someone that is trusting God and lifts you up and is encouraging? There's a pastor in Kansas City who saw a problem with his church, grumbling all the time. And he challenged his congregation to go 21 days without complaining. They say that's about the time needed to develop a new habit. He had special bracelets made, and as a reminder to live complaint-free lives, and it started a movement. And millions of these bracelets have been distributed. In fact, I need to go look and see if we can find them. Because, yeah, we're fortunate. I mean, we do grumble here sometimes, but not. I've been part of some churches where all it is grumbling, and grumbling against each other, and it's not a good situation being in a church, especially. You know, it's not good anywhere, but in a church. One of the major subjects of the New Testament that Paul stresses over and over and over again is to edify one another, to build one another up. And when you're grumbling, that's not doing that. So it's something the Israelites obviously had a problem with, and we need to watch.
That's
watch
so
us.
catchy.
Yeah.
It is.
Philippians 2:4 says, do all things without complaining and disputing. That's an important verse, and it's tough. It's so easy to complain.
Because it is inborn in us.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, they did want to go back to Egypt. Some people want to go back to the old church. They want to go back to the church they grew up in. But if you think back to the church you grew up in, I bet there were problems. I bet there were major problems. God doesn't want us looking back. He wants us looking forward. He wants us to go where he's leading us, and it's not backward. Now, there's aspects of the churches we grew up with that are great. It would be nice, but still, there's aspects of the church today that we're growing, and exciting things are happening, and we're learning more. So we need to keep learning and go forward. Okay, verses 2-4.
And all the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, would that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would that we had died in this wilderness. And why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let us appoint a leader and return to Egypt.
Okay, would it be better for them to go back to Egypt?
No.
They wish they had died in Egypt. They wish they had died in the wilderness. They don't want to die by the hands of the Canaanites.
Okay, God's going to give
But-
them their wish.
Yeah, but if you look at all those, the result is they're going to die. Any one of those choices, they're going to die. The choice they don't put in there is, let's follow God and go where he wants us to go. Then they wouldn't die in the way they think they're going to die. At first, this murmuring is directed directly at Moses and Aaron. But if you're murmuring against God's leaders when they're doing God's jobs, you're murmuring against God. Now, remember back, Moses said, just kill me now. And now, here's the Israelites saying, just kill us now. Remember, God didn't kill Moses. He didn't answer that prayer. But this time, he's going to give them what they ask for. They are going to die in the wilderness and never step foot in the promised land. They're getting what they asked for. Then they outright accused God of trying to murder their wives and kids. Just because he brought them out to the wilderness, it was with the purpose of killing them all. God is incapable of doing evil. Yet he's being called a murderer by his own people. Now, it's kind of ironic that they're accusing God of trying to murder their children, when it's their children that will enter the promised land.
And God had saved their children whenever the firstborn at the Passover.
Yeah.
Not only that, though, Pharaoh killed the firstborn. So you're contradicting yourself. You want to go back to the place where your firstborns were killed.
Yeah. Oh, no, they don't remember that. That was so long ago.
That was
We forget.
when Moses was a baby, so it was
Yeah.
over 80 years before.
Yeah. So, again, the answer to would it be better to go back to Egypt? Are they crazy? Do they think Pharaoh would welcome them back with open arms and say, oh, come back. We'll give you...
I would love to set foot after they made 10 plagues go through again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should say Pharaoh. It might be Pharaoh's son at this point.
Oh, it probably is, but I'm sure they would remember all those plagues and their firstborns being, it's possible that the current Pharaoh is,
more wicked.
well,
And
he would have been somehow related to the last Pharaoh, and yeah, he would have remembered.
And they would remember all their husbands that were killed in the Red Sea.
Yeah.
The Red Sea came back out.
Yeah. These people want everything handed to them.
Like, come on.
Yeah. So, for 2 years, these people have seen miracle after miracle, including manna and the cloud. And
meat coming down from the
Yeah.
sky. They're so sick of meat.
yeah. But when it comes time to trusting God in a critical moment, they fail again. They probably claim they believe God for a lot of things. And maybe they did, but not here. Then it is all out rebellion breaks out. They don't want God's leaders. They don't want God's land. They know better than God. And they want to elect new leaders. Brian Bell says, at Horeb, they said, let us make a calf to symbolize what had brought them out of Egypt. Now they say, let us make a leader to lead us back to Egypt. They like making their own things. Mm-hmm. They don't try to talk to God about any of this, which is, you can imagine God sitting there listening to this. And imagine his nose turning redder and redder. It's getting ready to burst. But let's see how how Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb react to this, verses 5 through 9.
Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And all the congregation set to stone them, and with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel.
Okay.
Then the Lord
Oh, that's enough. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we see two different reactions here. We see Moses and Aaron. They show so much maturity. They don't scream and yell. They fall down in prayer. They know the only hope here is God, and only he could bring a miracle that's going to solve all this. Normally, falling on your face in the Old Testament, you do that when you're ready to worship, when you're in awe of God. Normally, we see Moses and Aaron doing this in Numbers when they know God's judgment is coming, and we better step in here. And they humble themselves before God. Now, Joshua and Caleb, they are more demonstrative. They are going to attempt to persuade this people. They show how serious they are by tearing their clothes. People would tear their clothes when they were in mourning, or in deep grief. And they are acting as if someone has died. And they just don't give up to the crowd. They are willing to stand up. They remind the people again of the great land that God had promised. And they had seen it. And they knew just how great this land was. And that it was theirs if they would just follow God. When Caleb and Joshua say they are bread for us, in, I forgot which verse it is. 9. You know how soft bread is? How easy would it be to destroy a piece of bread? That's what they're saying. We could destroy the land just like they're a piece of bread.
Because it goes on to say they had no protection, but we have the Lord.
Yeah. And in Hebrew, the term for protection is shadow. God's shadow over them provides protection. So whenever you see shadow, it means God's protection. So Joshua and Caleb are pleading with the people, don't do this. Your sin is completely in your hands. And then the people respond. And what do they want to do? They want to stone them. They want to stone them because they're pointing out truth. Sometimes when we're doing something wrong, if someone points it out, sometimes we don't react well. Now, of course, a lot of it depends on how the person points it out to us. But many times if someone is criticizing you, it may be hard to take, but maybe you need to look at what the criticism is and evaluate yourself. Because maybe there is something that needs to change. Even if the person providing the news may not be doing it in the kindest way, maybe need to look at what they're saying. But typically people don't react well when someone tells them they're in sin. And these people don't react well at all. They want to get rid of the people telling them. And they decide to kill them. And then God steps in. That's it. Okay, his nose turned bright red by now. And notice it's at the tent of meeting, talking to all the people. He's not talking to just Joshua and Caleb and Moses and Aaron in private. He wants everybody to hear this. Because everybody is disobeying God except those 4. Because they're longing for death. They're accusing God of plotting murder. They have no faith. They're mourning for what they lost. When what they lost was not a good thing to keep. They're going backward. They're rejecting God's leaders. They're killing those who trust in God. So that all their sins are just piling up. And God's had enough of it. Verse 11 and 12.
The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they.
Okay, so he's done addressing Israel. He's talking straight to Moses this time. Now these are rhetorical questions, because does God need to really ask questions at all? He knows the answers to all this. And the people in rebellion are probably wondering, why aren't we hearing God anymore? And that happens to people today. That when you're in rebellion against God, you stop hearing him. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that turned away from God. God didn't turn away from them. God had only been good to them, and he had supplied them their every need, and some of their wants that they didn't need. So God says, I'm going to give them what they deserve. I'm going to kill them all. And they wanted to die in the wilderness. They're going to have it right now. And God offers to rebuild Israel, kill them all, and start over with Moses. Moses would have become a patriarch like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God had already offered the same thing to him back in Exodus 21, but he's offering it again. So Moses' response in verses 13 through 16.
And Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear it, for your might you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land. They have heard that you, Lord, are among those people, that you, Lord, are seen face to face, and your clouds stand before them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you kill these people as one man, then the nation will have heard of your fame, will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring these people to the land which he swore to them. Therefore, he killed them in the wilderness.
Okay, so Moses doesn't even mention the offer of being the father of the new nation. That's not even in his thoughts. He pleads for the people. He's spent so much of his life with this group of people, and it seems like he loves them, even though they are so rebellious. I mean, most people would say, yeah, God, get them.
Yeah.
But not Moses.
Just give them what they deserve.
Yeah. He's also concerned for God's reputation and his glory.
Yeah.
He's saying, if you destroy these people, what are the Egyptians going to say? Mm-hmm. That you just brought them out to kill them. They'd think that God wasn't able to take care of his own people, that their sin and rebellion was greater than their God. And Moses didn't want that picture of God out there.
Yeah.
We have Egyptians around us too. They look at us and they judge God based on us and what we do. That's kind of a scary thing. And it's a big responsibility that we're a picture of God. And Moses is saying, these people are a picture of you. You kill them and they're going to say, that's not a very powerful God. He begged God not to give the pagan nations around them any opportunity to think God had not kept his promise to his people. So verses 17 through 19 says, and now please let the power of the Lord be great as you promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. But he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Please pardon the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. So Moses is asking God, show your power by showing your mercy and your long suffering to this rebellious group of idiots. He's saying, you've shown your power in such a mighty way. Show it to the people around us now. Verses 18 and 19, the things listed in there are almost word for word what God spoke to Moses in Exodus 34, 6 through 8, when he talks about his steadfast love and forgiving iniquity, that kind of thing. So Moses is taking God's words and throwing them back at him. David Guzik says, Moses knew God's power and appealed to it. Moses knew God's promise and appealed to it. And Moses knew God's glory and appealed to it. Moses is so totally others-centered. He doesn't care about his own glory. He cares about God's glory, and he cares about the people. Okay, so this third to fourth generation thing, that has caused confusion through the ages, that the iniquity is going to go on to the third and fourth generation. So, and we know everyone is responsible for their own sin and their own salvation. So how do you reconcile that? So what is happening here is that the children suffer because of their parents' sins. Generational issues. Things go on generation after generation. It's something you've learned from your parents. Think about prejudice or abuse. It goes on in a cycle until someone chooses to break the cycle. It's not something you have to follow. You have the option not to follow a cycle. But if you don't break the cycle, you're carrying on the sin of your parent. So it's going on to the third and fourth and fifth and sixth. It will carry on until someone breaks it. Sin is like that. It will carry on till someone breaks that cycle. So while God's wrath can be seen to the third or fourth generation, his love is seen to the thousandth generation of those who love him. So his love is so much greater than sin. So notice in here throughout this, Moses doesn't say, but these people didn't sin, or they didn't mean it. He doesn't lessen their sin. He knows their sin. And he asks God to forgive it, not overlook it, but to forgive it. Verse 20.
Then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word.
So he agrees to do what Moses asks. He pardons him. What sweet words. Isn't it great that God pardons us? When it says, according to your word, that means according to your prayer. Moses' prayer mattered. Our prayers matter. Some people wonder if Moses' prayer was like an elaborate game that God was playing. God will threaten to do something he's not going to do anyway, and Moses prays, pretending to believe God really meant what he was threatening, and then when God heard his prayer, then he would forget his idle threat and do what he was going to do anyway. Well, that's not how prayer works. If God was pretending to go through something like that, that would be lying, and that would be something God doesn't do. Today, when we pray, we need to pray as if it's life and death. The difference between heaven and hell, and that something will happen because we're praying. We need to take prayer seriously.
Especially when we intercede for unsaved people.
Yes, that's one of the most, intercessionary prayer is one of the most important prayers we can do. So I'm so grateful we have a prayer team for VBS. That is going to be, we have someone that will be on site, but we have a lot of people that are going to be praying from home for VBS every night, and it comforts me to know we're going to be bathed in prayer. That's an important thing. Okay, verse 21 through 25. No names.
Thank you. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. No one who's ever treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea.
Okay, even though God doesn't kill them now, there are consequences. He showed mercy and pardon. They will not be put to death immediately, but they can't carry on as if nothing happened. That's not the way sin works now. If we sin, God will forgive us. But there are consequences to our sin. Sometimes more serious. If you commit murder, God may forgive you, but you're going to jail. It's still happening. When God says these 10 times that they've tested God 10 times, don't go back and try to count 10 times. Because what it actually means is repeatedly. They've repeatedly tested God. It's like saying 1,000,000 times for us. That was 10 times. They were a lot less. But it just means over and over again. So the words God uses in Hebrew are really forceful and direct. He's not pulling any punches here. Those who put God to the test and rebelled, they're not going to see the promised land. And that means everyone but Joshua, Caleb, and Moses at this point, and Aaron. But apparently it also seems to have applied to the Levites, which we don't hear about anything in here. Because Eleazar, Aaron's son, goes into the promised land. And Aaron's son's got to be pretty old by now. So when it was talking, it said, and God says, the numbered men. Remember, they did the census separately for the Levites in a different way. So apparently Levites get to go in the promised land. So we are not finishing this chapter. I was thinking, oh, am I going to have too much time left over? And we're not going to. Let me see. Anything else in here? So the last part is that God says, turn back toward the Red Sea. Where they had to come from?
The
Red Sea. It seems like he's going to answer their prayer and let them go back. We know they're going to turn again. But the consequences of sin carry a heavy weight on them. And we will end there. So, bye everybody that was watching online.